Olá para todas, todos e todes. Meu nome é Augusto Soledade, eu sou baiano, radicado nos Estados Unidos há 27 anos. Sou professor de dança na Universidade da Flórida e venho aqui hoje para apresentar para vocês um grande amigo, um grande artista da dança que eu conheci, que tem uma grande admiração. Qudus Onikeku, que hoje em dia é também um irmão que eu ganhei nessa vida, né? Qudus, it is so nice to have you here with me, man. You have no idea. It's let me just say, I think I've mentioned this to you before. You know, I first got to know about you through Onyeozuzu, you know, the dean at the College of the Arts at the University of Florida. And I remember at that time when she told me about your work, I went to the website to just find out a little bit more about you and Dance Gathering, you know, the event that you were putting together. And at that moment, the one thing that came to mind was that I wanted to write a grant so I could go and spend some time in Nigeria with you and learn everything from you, or learn as much as I could from you in Nigeria. But as I was thinking about doing that, so it happened that you wound up coming to Gainesville and to the University of Florida. So I was like, okay, I don't have to go to Nigeria because he is coming to the University of Florida. So it is such a pleasure to have you here. I have, as I've told you before, I have great admiration for you. And I am so honored to be the one introducing you to the Bahian community of dancers and dance makers. So welcome to Viva Dança International Festival.
Thank you very much, Augusto, for the invite, first of all, and also thank you for finding what I do interesting and important to be introduced to someone else. I am so excited because one of the life goals I think I still have is to make sure that I visit Bahia before I die. This is, if I don't do this, I will have to come back. So that's why I have to do it. It's an assignment of a lifetime, which is also very funny because I've been to Brazil a couple of times to show my work. But, for some reason, I've always been, in other places like Londrinas, Recife, Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, Campinas, where else? Yeah, I've been around. Like the closest I was to Bahia was when I was in Recife. Like, I'm in Recife, I should just go. but it couldn't happen because it's usually in the middle of a tour or something like that. And then the last 2 years, when we were supposed to go together in June, I got the funding to go, then COVID. So I'm like, okay, this is also getting me closer. This talk now is another way to get me closer to that. So if there's anybody listening and really wants to invite me, I really want to come to Bahia.
Well, I am inviting you again. So it's interesting because the same happened to me in relationship to Nigeria, right? I've always, wanted to go and tried to go. And then in 2020, when I had the opportunity to go participate in Dance Gathering, through your invitation, COVID hit us and exactly. I couldn't go. Like and we were so close. We were just like 2 weeks away.
Yeah. It was in April and the lockdown happened in March.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember.
We were just a few weeks away from that experience. But I feel that the fact that we're here together now, Q, is a good sign. So it means that we're getting closer to you, getting to Bahia,
and you going to Nigeria.
Into Nigeria.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So I feel that we're going to have a great conversation today. I'm very eager to have you present your thoughts, your ideas about dance, but not just about dance, about life, because it's very hard to separate one from the other, as we know. But just as a way for people to get to know you a little bit more, can you talk a little about your history? You know, how did you get here?
Wow, it's such a long journey, and a very sweet one, actually. It's I think there is something that I've always been propelling me. There's always something ahead of me. I am just kind of like following this path, and I suspect that, you know, as a start, the Yorubas believe so much in the concept of reincarnation as the base of everything. So the way things work for me is that this thing just happened. And when it just happened, then I then follow it through thoughts. It's not the other way around. It's not I think it, then I make it into action. No, it's the action takes place before I now like, hey, wait a minute. Why is this happening? What does this mean? What can I do with this? What can we achieve with this? So it's a thought process that comes after action. Why am I saying that? Is because, you know, from the age of 4 or 5, I started noticing that there was something a bit kind of like strange about myself. My father has 2 wives, so we have like 13 kids at home with cousins and family members. So it's a very big house, and I'm like the 12th kid out of 13. So in that house, there is never a quiet, silent moment. Everything is noisy, and but as a kid, I would always, you know, find my way into the tree or into the forest or into the loft. I go into the manhole and find myself in between the roof and the ceiling. And I would just be there for a long time. I just love the comfort and the coziness of that space and darkness and being alone. So what do I do as a kid? I don't even know, but I just know that the action itself is something I remember very clearly. But what am I thinking about? I don't think I can remember clearly. And that for me was the beginning of trying to, you know, figure something out. Then at the age of 8, I listened to Fela Kuti's music for the first time. And the thing about that music is that, you know, it's not like the first time I heard music. You know, we've been listening to all sort of music. My mom has a whole lot of records. And that specific one was like a flash. When I heard Fela's music, I don't even know what track was it, because now I'm a kind of like Fela expert. I know all Fela's music, but I don't even know which one I listened to first. That kind of like gave me that spark. But I knew something was different about that one. It's not about what the music it was singing. It was about what the music was saying to me, or what the music was activating within me. It was like an opening, you know, like an opening into all of this problem that I find myself into now. And I started following that voice. Then I started becoming an acrobat. So I started doing acrobatics by myself. Then it was that led me into dancing. Then from dancing, nothing else made sense. I used to be very brilliant in school when dance started. All of that, nothing made sense anymore. I was just like, this dance thing was like a trance. And I was just being pulled, you know, towards it. And after high school, it was clear to me that now this school thing is a distraction for me. I need to focus my attention on dance. And that was why I started, you know, learning from Lagos, go to Ibadan to work with a guy called Christopher Abdul. After I worked with Christopher Abdul for a while, then I started working with a choreographer in France called Eddie Malem. And Eddie Malem is a kind of interesting, cerebral, poetic kind of choreographer. And I suspect that it was my work and my admiration of his work. It was his work, sorry, and the admiration of his work that really also kind of like gave me my own pathway into dance. That is to say, there's always this poetic, this playing with ideas, this intellectualization from the body, like a way to use the body as a space of thinking in itself, not going through into literature or through words, but investigating the body itself as a place for knowledge making. And I think that's how eventually I started my own practice after Of course, I work with a few other choreographers, but he was like the one I stayed with for so long. And when I started making my work in France, immediately after school, so I went to circus art school in the process of all of that in France. Then immediately after school, I started making solo work specifically because I felt like there's a whole bunch of things I needed to reconcile, I needed to understand. So going into a group dance work was like, no for me. I needed to figure some things out. So I made my first 3 works as a kind of a trilogy of 3 different solos. The first one was titled My Exile is in My Head, which was really looking at the question of aloneness. What does it mean to be alone? How do one create a kind of a prison around oneself? How can we contemplate exile, not as a condition, but as a mode of thinking itself, as a place, imagining exile itself as a place, not a condition of not being able to go back or to return to something or to somewhere, but to figure out how do you construct a world that is, of course, because if you also talk about exile, you're talking about home in reverse, or home that is no longer. So there is a connection to the home, but it's not a play of, it's not an utopia anymore. It's not a play we go into, but there's a relationship, there's a memory, there's an experience that is connected to that. And that experience is also what is fueling my being in this new place that I find myself. So that work was really trying to, understand all of that concept. Then the second work was like, okay, now that you've identified yourself as an individual, look back into the collective. What do you see now? How do you see the collective again? What are the new eyes you have been able to repossess? That is not the eye of the nation state, or the eyes of religion, or the eyes of culture, or the eyes of the collective in all the different forms it expresses itself. But now when you look at this collective, what do you see? So that one was more about negation, mostly negating history, that history doesn't exist. It doesn't really exist, because I cannot hear my voice inside of it. I cannot hear my father's voice inside of it. I cannot hear my grandfather's voice inside of it. It is always from the point of view of an elite that is defining, or a particular intelligentsia that is defining what will be the history for everybody. So when people say, in 9/11, this is what happened on 9/11. No, this is what happened on 9/11 in one place. But there are other things that happen also all over the world that in 100 years' time will be completely silent in history. Only one thing, and one thing everybody must talk about. So I started realizing that there's a way at which we are being manipulated into accepting a collective narrative. And this collective narrative, in a way, is already imbued and embedded with bias and something that is actually against me already. So if I now teach myself that kind of history, or I'm teaching my children that history, I'm actually teaching something that's already against me to somebody that is already innocent of that. So the third one was now saying, so if history does not exist, then how do you deal with the past? Because the past is tangible, it does exist. And that was where the whole conversation, the whole interest in memory as a replacement for history started making sense for me. Then that is where I started looking within myself, towards myself, my own body, which is a contraption or a continuation of my father's body, which is a continuation of his own father's body. So I started looking for how can I elongate, prolong my own physical, how can I prolong my own memory, my lived memory, through the experiences and the body of my own father, his great-grandfather, and my mother, of course, in that genealogy as well. So that was where the whole conversation of body memory started becoming a thing for me. So now all the work I've made after that has always been a continuation of trying to understand this thing about the body memory, the body intelligence, the body as a space of refuge, the body as a space of reconstruction, recollection, fragmentation, put back together again. So when I meet other dancers from all over the world, anywhere, it is through that portal, through that space that I'm always having connection with other dancers, because I realized that there's something about your body that you are also recollecting. And maybe when we put pieces of those things together, I can also be able to go further in my recollection. I don't know if I go too far into.
No, I think it makes me think of so many different things, Q. But I find it interesting how I feel that in my own path, dance path, everything was constructed differently. I really enjoy hearing from you how in your process, the action came first and then the thought, because I feel that, especially for me, when it comes to dance, it was the opposite. It was really, I was having to really think and very deliberately make decisions about, the steps I needed to take, in order to do what I was being told I needed to do. And so, and I'm saying this because for instance, when I entered the University of Bahia, the Federal University of Bahia, what I brought with me was the samba that I learned from my family and the street dance that I knew from my experience in the community, and what I was being taught was really to predict and kind of very, again, deliberately make decisions about how I needed to move my body, through learning all these different techniques. And what I brought with me was not something that was embraced and was not something that was, taken into consideration at all, really. It was something that came ready, and there was, and there was this attempt to put it on me as nearly a formula,
But I'm interested in knowing though, what was the beginning, from home? What was the process of initiation, or even beginning? I don't want to use the word initiation, looks like a big thing. What was the beginnings of dance? Were there practices, or were there rehearsals, moment, or it was in the community and I picked it? How did that start?
For me?
Yeah, for you.
Well, I've always loved Carnival. So, and so it was just that's one moment that I know really interested me in dance specifically, being part of that celebration, being on the street. And I live, you don't know the geography in Bahia, but I lived in what is called and considered the historic center, which is, Pelourinho, Santo Antonio. So that's where I was born and raised. And so, and as a kid, my parents allowed me to, just go to one specific street, which is called Rua Direita de Santo Antonio. And we could go from point A to point B, and we couldn't go past that point because, that was an area where like the adults were and all was happening. So we couldn't go there.
PG-18.
And so, but that little strip, man, was my life, when it came to Carnival. And we would go, because at that time, there were, blocos, that was os corujas and os lordes and blocos and they were percussion heavy. So they were percussion-based blocos that paraded during Carnival. And I'm talking about the 70s, you know what I mean? So, and that's what we would do. It was really this like street experience with the other kids.
Yeah. So eventually the learning, because I'm interested in the modes of learning. So the learning experience was communal, was even sometimes competitive. And that was how the learning was happening. It was not even like we go to training, we go to rehearsals. And
no, exactly. No, it was very spontaneous that way,
Yes.
And I wouldn't say for Carnival specifically, for us, that learning was not competitive. It was really very creative and very
collaborative.
It was about like sharing that moment. And of course, what we were doing, we were just like, dancing to the beat, jumping to the beat, and that's what we did. We would be hugging one another. I mean, and that's how you start to understand yourself physically
Mm.
and expressively to a certain
Interesting.
degree, you know.
I
And
mean,
of course, you're not aware of that right away. You know, I think it comes later as you start to
that's the, see. So when I say, I think for many of us, especially those of us who are coming from African diasporic forms, that's the only way you can start. There is no other way. It starts ahead of us. And that for me is what I insist in retaining as I move between all these different spaces now that are not as essentially African spaces, but also crossing into other spaces, is to say, I refuse to be co-opted. I refuse to be cajoled. I refuse to be taken away from my natural habitat.
Yeah.
My natural habitat is that dance comes in a much more fun way if I allow it to express itself. Then I can use logic to follow it afterwards. But the moment I replace it, I am crossing into a Western form, which is the artist is the genius and he imagines everything, then every other thing kind of follows, bow down to him, and then is celebrated. And I don't think that I really don't believe in that form because it doesn't support life. It doesn't support life in itself. It doesn't support regeneration. It doesn't support community. It doesn't support collaboration. And that for me is where I find it really hard to adopt, even though I exist in the Western space oftentimes now, but I refuse to adopt that pattern. It's not a question of hierarchy or revolt. It's just a question of, I just think this one is more efficient. That's all. Even in terms of action and in terms of intellectualization, intellectual traditions, this intellectual tradition I actually think is actually more interesting for me. So I'm interested in how we take those things that are primal. That's what I was saying about exile, because you see, there's everything you can change in this life. Certain things you cannot change. You cannot change your family. You cannot change your childhood. You can never, ever change those things. And now, how do you incorporate, include that in the process is all I'm asking myself every time I'm walking into any new space or any new thing. So when people say, oh, Q, you're not participating enough in these communities that you find yourself now, I said, because I choose what I choose to participate in. Because imagine, I move around a lot. I was living in France. I used to be in Nigeria. Now I'm in the United States. Imagine I move from one local problem to another local problem. I'm going to get confused at some point. I just need to focus on what is my life mission as a dancer. Whether I find myself here or in India tomorrow, or in Brazil, or in Cuba, or in Malaysia, I need a consistency. And this life consistency, I need something that can embrace me, that supports me as I move around. And that is where the Yoruba philosophy really gives me a really sense of belonging anywhere, which is amazing, because the Yorubas have thought about the world in a all-inclusive manner. There is no the other. Within this world structure that the Yoruba constructs, there is no the other. The other is evil. And because the other in terms of human beings, humans cannot be evil. Humans are both evil and good inside of them. So we cannot say the devil. Devil as one monofunctional human being, only producing evil things. It doesn't exist within the Yoruba construction. And anywhere you go to, the center is still there. So what it means to be Yoruba is to be at the crossroad, at the intersection of knowledge, of people, of forms, of ways of doing, or ways of thinking. So if that intersection is already like a constant, Eshu Elegba is a constant. No matter what your deity is, Eshu is always there. So if that is at the base of the ways that we think, then I am looking for that all-encompassing way of including everything, and still thinking, it is still Yoruba. Oh yeah, but we are Jewish people. It's okay. There's already a part of it in it. we are Hitler. Yeah, Hitler too. Yeah, there's a part of it in it. We must include everything and then allow for the thing that will emerge to be Iwapele, Iwalewa, all these notions of well-being, all these notions of balance, all these notions of vivre ensemble, like living together. You know, for me is what I'm excited about. But to negate or to remove or to erase all of these things that actually made it possible for me to even say, I think I want to become a dancer. To remove all of those is to really get lost about what it even means to be a dancer.
Yeah. You know, one thought that comes to mind when you bring this, concept of intersectionality, and really thinking about that point in the middle where the lines really cross, and I think immediately about possibility, because when you are at that point of intersecting, look at all the different possibilities. If you really think about two lines, there's at least 4 possibilities,
already.
Already. 4 possibilities, right? But then if you can just create, other imaginary lines that will keep crossing through the center.
Exactly.
And it's just like,
exactly.
Exactly.
And even if it doesn't cross through the center, for example, just imagine this one that is going here, but there's another crossing happening here. So the center itself is not one place. That is what the Yoruba taught me. That is to say, we can be Yoruba in Nigeria. We can also be Yoruba in Brazil. We can also be Yoruba in Cuba. We can also be Yoruba in Togo, in Benin Republic. And to think about a nation state that is not bound by a place, for me, is one of the most amazing ideas. Because nationalism is a cancer that is eating up all of us, because we have a very short memory. Some 1,000 years ago, there was nothing like Brazil. So when people would come to me and say, don't let us forget the past, I'm like, I think you're the one forgetting the past, because how long past are you talking about? You're talking about 200 years? No, I'm talking about 2,000 years. I'm talking about 5,000 years. Do you think we don't have the capacity to recollect those? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And that is one of the spaces where I feel like this whole notion of body memory, as esoteric, as psychic as it might sound, I really do believe in it. I really do believe in it. I feel like the problem we are having right now is that we do not have a technology that can help us to fix some things in our body and allow the dancers to dance and then capture all the imageries and the ideas and concepts and knowledge and memories that is being exhumed through that dance. How I wish we're going to get to a point one day where we will have a technology that would allow us to capture not only our dreams, but also allow us to capture what our body is saying, our body language. Because until we're able to do that, everything I'm saying now sounds so abstract, but I know it's not, because I am a practitioner of this thing. I know it is not. I know that there's a whole lot that the body can say about time, about our being here. There's a whole lot of witnessing that it can do. That race is a fake construct. Is a very young construct when you look at the history of humanity. Before then, there was nothing like white. There was nothing like black. People organized themselves in tribe. But if we even go further to 10,000 years before now, when everybody was in Africa, before the migrations that happened, it's like when we look at all of that and the body, whether we talk about migration, whether we talk about racism, whether we talk about genocide, whether we talk about war, whether we talk about discrimination, the body is the only thing that is collecting and keeping all of those things, all of those experiences. And then what do we do afterwards? We pass it over to our offspring.
Yeah.
Then they started like, I'm moving this way. I don't know why. Oh, you don't know why? Because your father experienced that, and he has passed it on to you because he didn't resolve it. So for me, I feel like that for me, that concept of not knowing that the center is in a place. The center is not a place. The center is only an idea, and it can always shift.
Yeah, this is great. It makes me think, Q, of a few years ago when I was really trying to understand myself as an artist and what I was doing, and the term Afrofusion first came. The very first time I heard that term came from Vincent Mensoe, that South African
Yes,
choreographer,
absolutely.
performer, and dance artist who I also really admire. And at that point, the things that I was doing, I would call it fusion only, because I felt, everything is really, there's so much, intersecting, there's so much blending, there's so much in our experience,
Yep.
I really didn't believe that I lived in isolation, you know. I think, you brought at the beginning this idea of being isolated, and I I think at a certain point in life, we all go through that moment of understanding like
Yes.
really who we are and that we're so different from everyone else that
Exactly.
it creates that sense of, you know what, I'm here by myself.
I'm alone.
There's no one else like who can experience life the way I do. And so, but going back to when these ideas were really floating in my head and I was trying to understand really who I was as an artist, and when I heard that term, I was like, this is a little closer to what I feel I do, because I really believe that what I'm bringing, through the dances that I'm creating or the dances that I'm performing, when I'm moving, really has strong sense of culture, of my cultural upbringing, of that, community and family experience that I had, and that I can simply not escape. I cannot make it disappear. I cannot erase it. I really felt I could not do it, and so the Afro was specifically connected to my sense of community and family, and even more to my sense of belonging.
Yes.
And so with that, I started to use that term Afrofusion. And then at a certain point, I felt I needed to define Afrofusion for myself because I felt that was my own way of understanding it and why I was using it, which, I believe might be different from how, Vincent Mensoe uses it. And so when I started to think about it, I realized that really that Afrofusion for me is really a dialogue between my two senses of home. The first one is home as my sense of belonging, and the second home is a home that keeps shifting as I move and as I travel the world. And so this is what Afrofusion is for me.
So it's more Aphrodite fusion for you.
Say that again?
Aphrodite fusion.
Yes.
It's diffusing every time. I mean, I of course I know so much about the Afrofusion. It was not just Prince Vincent Mansouri, actually. I think it was something there was a movement in South Africa at that time where, Black South African choreographers and artists started really thinking about their connection, especially this looking for this Africanness in what they do. And one of the reasons why they were also using that term was because you could see that most of the people, even Manzoe and the rest of them, Gregory Makoma, they were mostly, trained in classical forms. They were trained in ballet. So when you see Vincent doing it straight, he has understood how to fuse those two things together and then create a unique form from it. So yeah, I mean, I have been. I remember when I heard that term as well. I was in South Africa when I heard it. I thought it was clever. I thought it was okay. This is interesting. It's another one, because at the time there was this whole conversation about Afro contemporary Afro, this, and the South Africans said, you know what, we're not interested in this contemporary conversation. We just do Afrofusion. But I also feel like it's one of those. It's one of those activities that we get ourselves involved in that we start to lose focus of the work itself, because we're looking for categories. And I have never been a very huge fan of categories, because categories are not useful for those who are practicing. Categories are useful for marketing and for those who want to say some things about it. So we are looking for ways to, and it's a very capitalist mind frame, in my opinion. It's a capitalist mindset to look for how else can I sell this thing? You know, under what category should I place it so that the people who want to buy it can understand? And I feel like I've always tried to evade categories and to make sure that there is a constant fluidity, just like you said, this diffusion of things, this fusion that is constantly happening. And because change is also constant, I allow myself to drift, you know, and the right to opacity is also a right I keep, that only me understand the code, because like I said, the action is happening ahead of me. So if I use language to pin it down, I am also making an error of not allowing the thing to be what it has to be, what it has to become. I don't know what it has to become. All I'm doing is that I am trying as much as possible to be as obedient to the process and to the voice that is coming from within or from without, and to just allow myself to be like a vessel. You allow the thing to come, and all you're doing is, at least all I can do at most actually, is to create pathways for them. You know, is to say, okay, you go to this way, okay, you go that way. But am I the one making them? I would be lying if I say I'm the one making them, because I don't control those things. Those things actually control me. All I'm making effort to do is to be grounded enough in relationships and in connections and in collaborations with actual things, actual people, actual subject matter, actual, you know what I mean? You are grounded enough to use those things as a way to anchor yourself. Because if you don't, you can get drifted. You can get really carried away by the wave. The wave is it's much sometimes. It's a lot sometimes. And I feel like, I mean, when you look at artists like Fela Kuti, like Bob Marley, you can feel the wave. You can feel how the wave is carrying them. And I'm not trying to claim anything, but I feel like I come from that tribe as well, of artists who allow the flow, allows for the flow to come, and then use that as and use my own expertise, my intelligence, my experience, my training, use all of those as my force of holding it down, so that it doesn't go, you know, in a crazy way. So for me, I feel like there's always this need to understand categories, to understand names. Africa, sometimes it's good for me, sometimes it's bad for me. I know that. I know that Black, sometimes it's good for me, sometimes I don't want to hear it. Yeah, because it depends on what I'm looking at, where I'm looking at, and who is looking at me, who is naming it, and who is using it, and at what time period of time of existence, what is happening in the news at the time. All of this determine, do I want to participate or not? And I retain my flexibility to go into and outside of those categories. I never reject them outrightly, but at the same time, I never embrace them outrightly. I just kind of like, I'm aware of them.
Yeah,
I'm aware of them.
I think what you're saying is really important, and that's why, you know, it's an honor to have you here and share your thoughts and your ideas. I totally understand your point about categories, and I think I see it the way you do as well. But what I do remember is that for me, at that specific point in life, the sense of invisibility for what, you know, descendants, for Afro descendants was so strong that I felt that, you know, using just fusion, for instance, was not enough, you know, and would, in a way, I would be, you know, contributing to the sense of invisibility. And for me, I felt it was important to, at that specific time, to take a stand and say, you know what, no matter what you see here, there is Afro in it. And I want you to take it that way, you know? And the response to that, when people came to see my work, they were like, oh, where's the Afro? Where's the Afro in your work? And I was like, I am sorry you cannot see it, but it's your problem. You know, you're gonna have to learn what Afro is about, because
exactly.
where's the Afro? I mean, I'm telling you, you know, people challenged me in terms of that, because they are, well, but your work is contemporary, it's this and that. I'm like, no, I'm telling you what my work is, because I know where I come from. And, you know, I again, going back to that sense of belonging and going back to the sense of how it all started for me. And I simply could not erase that from my process, you know, but it got to a point where if I didn't tell people that that's where it was coming from, they would just totally disregard it and say, oh yeah, it's just, you know, contemporary dance. And then, but the idea of contemporary dance was really connected to everything else except what I was really doing and where specifically I was coming from. You know what I mean?
I totally get it. And I feel like, so I wrote an article at some point, so maybe like 12, 15 years ago. The title of the article was My Trouble with Contemporary African Dance. Because, you know, one of the reasons why I started like staying on contemporary as the only category that I can possibly attach my dance to was because I got to a point where I realized that contemporary just means with time. It's a Latin word that actually means with time. And I find it very interesting, because within that already, the divergent point between my way of seeing the world and the majority, which is white, way of seeing the world is actually, it's in the disparity between the understanding of time. Number one sees time as a linear occurrence, but we don't see time as a linear occurrence. We see time as a cyclical occurrence, you know, and it is not non-linear. So I said, okay, this is interesting. Since contemporary means with time. So time is where we're going to use. Time is where is the entry point every time. Now, I will not call what I'm doing Afro-contemporary. No, you will see it, but I will call it contemporary. Because what I'm actually, the case I'm making is not about the naming of it. The case I'm making is actually an aesthetic case, and an aesthetic conversation I'm actually having, not an ontological, sorry, not ontological, what's the word of naming? Semiotic, yeah. I'm not having a semiotic conversation about what I'm doing. I actually call it whatever you like. It is the aesthetic I'm interested in. I'm interested in the aesthetic. What does, even those of us who say Afro this, Afro that, African this, African that, what are we really doing when we are still using Western aesthetics? What are we really doing? It's the aesthetic that I'm interested in. I'm not interested in, and the form. The aesthetic and the form, you know, is what I'm interested in. And looking at the philosophies that actually braise this thing we even call Afro. Have we done enough philosophical debate, enough philosophical exchange, conversation around what it means to be Afro? Or is it just a kind of a umbrella word that we just feel like, oh, this connects to me, you know, I feel good using this word. And I think this is what I see most of the time, anywhere on the continent, in Europe, in America, in Latin America, in Brazil. People kind of like, it's again, if I use this word again, I'm going to get in trouble again. It's laziness.
You're the troublemaker, so go ahead.
It is creative laziness that we're not doing the work. We don't want to do the work. So we're looking for a term that somebody created and we just say, oh, let me just adopt this one. But because if we are really doing the work, we will realize that no, actually the term is not that important.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you like, you call what I'm doing. I don't care, really. I am following what am I doing, and why is what I'm doing. Why is it grounding me? How is it grounding me in what I really believe in? For me, I think that is the most important thing. Now, with somebody that sees you, Augusto, somebody sees you in Brazil, they'll call you mulatto. Somebody sees you in South Africa, they'll call you colored. Somebody sees you in the United States, they call you black. Somebody sees you in Nigeria, they can call you white. So now, if your psychological balance is dependent on what they call you, there will be a big problem for you. But if you already are grounded in your own philosophical thinking and aesthetic thinking about what you do, and you know what you are.
Yeah.
Now, whatever anybody decide to call me, I'm like, oh, really? That's who? Okay. You just laugh about it and you move on, because that's not where the real conversation is happening.
Yeah.
And that, for me, is what I felt at some point. I started taking myself away from this conversation on the continent. Like, you guys are spending too much energy on this thing. And I think even it's too early. It's too early for us to even know what to call it.
Mm.
Let everybody just continue doing the work. If we all are doing the work and we're doing it honestly and rigorously, thinking on our feet with our body, it doesn't matter. There will always be new form and new names tomorrow. There will always be new ones. My children are going to come with another new one. And for me, yes, there should be more and more and more. We are all adding to the complexity and the impossibility of definition of what it means to be African. It is impossible to define it.
Yeah, I think this is a great point, but I feel it also brings us to a moment, talking about time, it brings us to a moment where I believe these conversations are being had a lot more than back in the day, which I feel is going to help us get to a next level, especially when it comes to dance, and this idea of where expression comes from, how do you get to express your artistic thoughts, as you said, is it really necessary to even to label it, to try to define it? Why not just live it through the experience of the body, not just as the body that's performing it, but also the body that is watching it and interacting with it in a different way, that's not necessarily performing it, even though if you really amplify the thought and think that that experience of going to watch a performance, as the viewer, you can also see yourself as part of the performance, and therefore a performer as well.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So, but these conversations are important to have right now, because I feel they're definitely different from back in the day.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important. I want to bring one point that came to my mind a little earlier, Q, and I think it might have been in a conversation that we had at the Collegian of African Diaspora Dance Conference. Yeah. And that was that idea that you could actually, in Yoruba culture, you could actually change the past by the way you position yourself. Was that a conversation I had with you?
Yes. So, and that's
so intriguing.
Yes.
Talk a little bit more about
You see, I of course the Yoruba believe that you can change the past based on who is narrating it, and from what point of view and for what purpose, because actually what it means, even though when I first heard that phrase, I thought it was very powerful, because I've always been pulled apart about the way we talk about the past, the way we narrate the past. So when I come and I say, Black people, get over it. Get over it. People think, oh, what do you mean get over it? We cannot forget the past. And I said, that's the point. You are forgetting the past. You need to go beyond before the encounter with white people. What were you? Who were you? What were your philosophy? What were the empires? At some point in the history of humanity, Egypt was the most, actually, Egypt is the first civilization. Before Egypt, there was no civilization. There were peoples, but a civilization that had a structure. Egypt was the first one. Do you think Egypt looked like Arab, like it looked like now? No, Egypt were Black people. So if you cannot get yourself back to that way of thinking, then the past is useless for you, because it is not in any way psychologically empowering you. And one thing I realize is that if we can have imagination of the past, because let's be frank, for you to everything we know about the past today, it's the work of imagination. We were not there. We didn't experience any of these things. Let's be sincere with ourselves. It is only a narrative that formulated that imagery for us. Yeah. And that imagery is what we kept. And that keeping is the problem, because the imagery of me being a slave is not a very good one. It only creates trauma for me. It only creates problems for me psychologically. So if I can do the work of imagining the past into concrete visualization, why not just change the direction? Why not do the same for the future? Why waste the energy, this imaginative energy, this creative energy that we have? Why waste it in reconstructing a past where we are not even great? Because if we narrate the past, the story of slavery, for example, in this country, from the point of view of the resilience and how the slaves were the ones who eventually ended the system of slavery, the evil, cruel, violent, murderous, genocidal system of slavery, where everybody thought it was normal. If the slaves were able, and this went for how many years? Like 200 years? Do you know what 200 years looks like?
It was more than 200 years. But...
So if these people who didn't even see the beginning of it, if they could over time come to imagine themselves out of that system, number one, they need to imagine themselves out of it. They need to imagine that there is a possibility for emancipation and freedom. There's a possibility for that. And that imagination was what fueled everything else. The capoeira, the jazz, the music, the dance forms, the martial art that we created, it was out of imagination. So now I have a feeling that we have dumped down our capacity to imagine the future. We have reduced it to a game about the past. We have reduced it, because imagine if the slaves were thinking about the past alone. There was no way for emancipation. No matter what anybody said, it was the enslaved people themselves that put an end to that system and then narrated a different story of this country. So for me, that is a powerful work of imagination. And that is why I am so much interested now in using all the tools that I have in my hand to imagine a different future and to rewrite the past and say, that is the past told from your point of view. From this other point of view, this is the past I want to at least teach my children. I want to tell myself and anybody that I get to meet. This is the past when we were great, when we were great and when we were also not very great, when we were also killing ourselves, because the past is a constitution of everything. And the same thing about the future. So we must realize that even in the future, there will be everything inside of it. Now, what pathways are we interested in? What map are we redrawing? What connections are we making? And that for me is really one of my real preoccupations in all my work that I've been doing lately. Is really about reconstructing the past and then imagining a very different future.
talking about future, can you make me think of your Afropolis project? Can you tell everybody a little bit more about that? Because
So
I think it has to do with the future, does it not?
well, well, okay. You know, it's funny because when we were talking about this whole thing about category and Afro and all of that, I almost said it, but it's coming back now. So for me, the term Afro is useful when it is creating a container, and not when it's individualized. When it is put within a collective structure, I can, yeah, why not? But individually, it doesn't mean that you must do anything that has to do with Afro. You know, just like I heard in the conference we went to, this term Afrogenic. I love that term because Afrogenic means that they have a kind of a common gene. You know, like if we look into our bloodstream, when we go deep into the genetic formation, there's a kind of connection. And really, it means about 98% of humanity, really, or maybe 100. So for me, the way it is within that form, it is within that form that I imagine in Afropolis. That is to say, let's look for a kind of a network. Let's create a network that is at the same time digital, virtual, at the same time physical. So there are three pillars to Afropolis. One is what we call Afropolis Creative Tribe. Second one is Afropolis App meaning artists, producers, and presenters. Then Afropolis Gathering. So the first one is that we are going to identify a kind of a collective of creators or creatives, artists, dancers, musicians, poets, DJ, fashion designers, whatever, architects, whatever. And then we create a kind of a system of interaction, connectivity, sharing within this ecosystem, and also sharing their work, proposing their work to presenters or whatever. Then we curate this digital venue where people can have access to all of these works we've been curating. Then we push it in the circle of other artists who might want to see what these creators are doing, or presenters who are looking for what people are doing on the continent and in the diaspora, or producers who they themselves are also looking for artists to partner with or creators to partner with. That's the second aspect of Afropolis. Then the third aspect of Afropolis is this annual gathering that we organize. So the last year it was in Barcelona. This year it's going to be in Marseille, in France. Next year it will be in Lyon, and it keeps traveling around. So the gathering never happened in one place. So when we say Afropolis, we are not talking about Africa. We're talking about African world, African cities. And for us, in the way we imagine it, Bahia is an African city, Barcelona is an African city, Lisbon is an African city, Paris is an African city, because we are there doing things. We are not all that invisible. We might be invisible to the mainstream, but we are actually creating a contact zone where people can actually see, if they open their eyes, that things are happening within that community on a global scale. So yeah, that's more or less to talk. It was a frustration that I had during dance gathering, the one you were supposed to come for, actually, that we couldn't do it in real time. Then we move it online. So moving it online was actually a way for us to reflect. What does it really mean to take what we do online? You know, just like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the spaces, they are heavily colonized spaces. They are spaces that is not thought about. We were not thought about initially. We were always an afterthought, even though our work, our dance, our music is what they use to make their money. We are the ones putting our content to all of these so-called technologies without even them recognizing our participation aesthetically, our participation economically, our participation demographically in terms of numbers. We have the numbers as well. So for me, I felt like it was high time we create our own platform that is being designed using our own ideas and ways of seeing the world, and really, really doing away with, you know, patriarchal, white, imperialist, capitalist ways or forms or modes of organizing. but there are other ways that you can organize, archive ourselves, and create a kind of cartography on the global scale. Who is where doing what? So that like that, if I want to go to Bahia next, I just need to go to Acropolis. Who is from Bahia here? And you go. So like that, you can also create connections between different people. Yeah, that's also a longer explanation.
That's what we're going to do. We're going to bring it to Bahia. But, you know, I would like you to tell us, what is your vision for the future?
I mean, the future, you see, that's the thing. The future is here. The future is now.
Okay.
If you look at it from the point of view of the Yoruba way of looking at time as in a non-linear fashion, because also the futurist project is a Western project as well. It's because, you know, the Christian mind always believe that we're coming from somewhere, then we live our life to go to heaven or to go to hell. So the future is either utopic or dystopic in that way as well. And, you know, we're not coming from that. We're not coming from that. We are coming from a space where whatever it is that we need to do it now. We're not doing it for a time future. We do it in time. We do it for now. We do it for the unborn because the unborn also exists now. We do it for the ancestors because the ancestors also exist now. And we do it because we have a mission. And that mission has nothing to do with past, present, or future. So really my project in terms of what I'm hoping to see in all of these things that we've been doing, all these things we have been talking about, I'm hoping to see a world really where we will not have any need to emphasize Afro, Africa, Black, white. We will not have to emphasize them anymore because nobody is blind. Nobody is blind. Let us be multiple. Let us be complex. Let all of us be individuals in a collective. Let us be unified in our diversity. Let us be, and let us know that being, the difficulty of being is the reason why we all are creatives, is the reason why we all have to be creative. Because living itself, it's a hard work. Because how do you understand how to live well? How do you understand how to die well? We don't know. So in the process of doing all of that, we also know that we all came here for a particular purpose. And before we got into flesh, we were very clear about the reason why we're coming back. The moment we entered into this like, oh, Black Lives Matter, oh, slavery problem, and we forget. We totally forgot why we came back. So I feel like when we create a level playing ground, where we are not thinking about inclusion for anybody because nobody wants to include anybody in their life. We're not thinking about diversity. We're not thinking about access, but we have a level playing ground where the rules are fair for everybody to thrive. That for me will be a moment where I would no longer bother if I have Afro anything beside my name because there will be no money to highlight them because it will be so obvious. That for me is really the kind of future that I'm really hoping that we'll get to in a very short time.
Well, I hear the word fairness, and I think that's one of the biggest challenge for all of us, right? It's really fairness, and I guess to a certain degree that's that what would definitely make a difference, right? And would help with making a lot of these, you know, categories and labels disappear. You know, it's like we wouldn't need to be concerned, you know, with, you know, someone having power over someone else and really, you know, leading or directing, creating narratives, you know, that will make others, you know, invisible, or, you know, really constructing this sense of unfairness, you know. So yeah, I hear you. And
yeah, there's the question of fairness, and there's also the question of dignity. You know, when we all are dignified in who we are, where I matter, you know, where I have a sense of belonging, and this sense of belonging does not penalize me because I belong to a particular people, then I will penalize. That is why people are running away from belonging because it doesn't offer them membership. This belonging doesn't give me membership. So you know what? I don't want to belong to that. But for me, then that is where unfairness also comes in, because when we don't feel dignified in our own body. I have a gay body, I have a trans body, I have a Black body, I have a female body, and I don't feel dignified, then we're not talking about fairness anymore. Human dignity should be the center of every thought. Any action, any technology, any ways of seeing the world, any aesthetics, any form of intellectualization, anything we do, if it doesn't put the human dignity, number one, at the center of it, but most importantly, not just the human as the human form, but of course also all the, the planets, the non-living thing that coexist this space with us, the animals, the nature. If we don't put them in consideration that they're part of the circle, then yeah, we will continue to see a situation like what is happening in Russia right now, what has always happened in Brazil, what is happening in America. We will continue to see an explosion of all of these things. And I feel like coming back to the real purpose of this conversation is to also teach dancers. I mean, you are HOD at the University of Florida, and I also teach dancers. Is to continue to teach dancers that there is already a form of knowledge that is being produced in their body, that there is already a form of knowing that is already happening within their body, and they should trust it. And they should trust it and know that they are also capable of participating in making this world a better place. Because what the world wants right now is not enough. It's not again more talking or again more thinking, because talking and thinking have destroyed the world to where we are right now. What we need more is sensing. When we can sense and also connect through sensing, connect through our sensibility, create through our sensibility, add to this planetary sensorium that is happening. There's a shift in time going on. And I feel like those who can really explain and express to us what is really going on are those who are connected to their body and to their spirit, to their body and to their spirit. So whether you express that in singing, in music, in poetry, in dancing, in fashion, in design, I feel like we need artists more than ever now, because they are the ones who can really capture all the possible powers and information that is going on in space right now in this particular time. And they can also help all the others who don't have the capacity to capture those things, to look, to experience them, to learn from their own experiences, and then get it, because there's a whole number of transmission that is also happening body to body or sound to body or sound. Because for me, I feel like we haven't given enough importance to senses. We have created a world that has designed itself through a particular mode of prism, of thinking, and particular mode of creating meaning. And if you don't fit within those forms, now you oblige yourself to either learn it or just be at the back. And I say, no, I think we should change it now. We need to bring dancers, more and more dancers, to the center now, and let them tell us what do they feel.
Well, the point that you're making now, Q, especially when you talked about, the fact that, I teach dance and you teach dance in a university setting. But one other aspect of all of this that came to my mind right away was really empathy, and like more and more, and I'm learning, because I'm really going through this process of rethinking everything that I'm doing, and I'm realizing that that it's in our teaching, it's so important to cultivate a sense of empathy, because without that sense of empathy, what we bring is, if we do not bring a level of openness to what someone else can offer, man, we're in trouble, trouble in the sense that we're not, I guess, creating and cultivating space for change, really, and that's important, because, and I see it being as just as important as the sense of fairness and dignity, Empathy is another pillar that I feel we need to bring to this conversation, and to how we interact with one another.
And the last one,
learning
and the last one after empathy for me will be the openness also to other people's stories, because I feel like we have, especially as Black people, really, and you saw this, in Duke yourself, when we are very quick to come and say, oh, you think you got it bad? My pain is more than your pain. My pain is more important than your pain. But I totally disagree. White people also have their pain. Like there is pain across board. I remember when I was in Spain, I was talking, and this woman kept using the word black, 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 black. And I said, I don't understand what you mean by black. I was like, I said, please, maybe define blackness for me. Then I would probably understand better. They say, yeah, people who were turned into tools for capitalists, exercise of wealth and product and blah, blah. When she said all of that, I'm like, I mean, really? I think there are more Black people in the world right now, if that's your definition of blackness. Because a whole lot of people are becoming tools for capitalist operations. So for me, I feel like sometimes when we're so closed up in our categories, we automatically create othering and otherness. And everybody that doesn't belong to that category, they are other. And they can never understand what we feel, and they can never feel the same way as we feel. And I feel like there is a whole lot going on in the world right now that we should tone down a bit, our own positionality, and then to listen more, to do more of listening. Because no matter how much pain I feel, let me hear yours. Let me still have the capacity to be human. Because you might do something that is very wrong to me. I can address that without denying your humanity. That for me is what I'm saying, that we should have the capacity to listen to one another more, and to be genuinely vulnerable to one another more. Because vulnerability is also something that is very, very missing in our dealings, And again, everything we've said so far, the dancer's body knows it.
Yeah.
Empathy, vulnerability, fairness. The dancer don't have to know it intellectually. Actually, the problem is that the dancers don't think about it intellectually.
Yeah.
But when they come on stage, there's no way they can dance. At least there's no way you can be an amazing dancer if you don't already understand all of this in an embodied manner.
I hear you. Q, I want to ask you a little bit about, any, artistic project that you have in mind. Is there anything that's brewing right now? Are you working on anything right now?
Yeah, we
Tell
are.
us about it.
We're working on of course, I'm always working on something for sure. The number one thing is, of course, we are getting set for another tour in Europe and in Canada and a bit of the United States of Reincarnation, which is the work I premiered last year and is still touring. Then we are working on a kind of a sequel to Reincarnation, which is titled Out of This World. And as a process of how to get to this creation, Afropolis 2022 in Marseille is happening this June 27th to July 3rd, which is this big gathering we are organizing there. And as part of that gathering, it will also be like a kind of a way to also identify artists that I can work with and collaborate with for the new work. So Afropolis gathering is like kind of a meeting place, audition kind of thing, where you get to meet the people you want to collaborate with. Then we continue working from next year to create this new work. But however, as part of the process, so what we've done this time is that we've been able to look at one effort that I've been making in a long time actually, is to be able to look at ways at which what we do can be sustainable. That is to say, we are not always, running after some grants or running after fundraising to be able to do what we want to do, to be able to dance. The dance is so primal to me that I cannot wait. I cannot wait. When I want to do something, again, it goes ahead of me. When I follow it later, I'm like, oh, I need money. But the thing must start ahead of me. Dance is always the first thing. gathering, meeting, dancing together is the first thing. Every other thing follows. So we said, okay, since this is the way we work, and this is the way I work particularly, can I create a structure around me that supports this way of being spontaneous? So we've been able to do something that is that I feel like I need to talk about a lot, actually, because it is so crazy and unique in the way I think we structured it. So let me tell you, Afropolis is a digital platform that we have where we get to see different things and meet different people. Then we have this gathering that is going to happen in Marseille. And this gathering, I've been able to propose it to a festival in Marseille that is interested in hosting us and then eventually paying for 2 performances. But what are we going to do? Nobody knows. So we are going to gather online between April and June and exchanging. Then all of us meet physically in Marseille for 1 week. And the task is that at the end of this 1 week, actually at the end of 5 days, there must be something to present because we are already in the program of the festival. So from that, you're able to use this notion of co-production and also presenting, which is the language the system understands, as a way to gather everybody, perform, and pay everybody, and everybody goes away. But for me, this is just an audition for the next work. So out of all of these 20, sorry, what am I saying? Out of these 50 people that are going to gather, I don't know, 50 for now, maybe there might be up to 100, that are going to gather. At the end of this process, I need to choose at least 10, 12, 13 people that will be in this next work. So this next work, what am I doing? The research process of this next work, I was able to propose it to another funding as a research. What am I doing with that one? So all the research that we're doing, all the interviews, all the archive materials that we are getting, I'm getting about 50 different talks from the likes of James Baldwin to Maya Angelou to Usman Sembene to Wale Soyinka to Achille Mbembe to all the thinkers that I respect, that I feel like what I'm trying to express in this new work, this whole idea of being completely away from this world and constructing a different one. But I'm not the one constructing it. It has been in construction for hundreds of years, but for some reason, they've not been heard or been seen, or they've been heard, but not fully heard. So I am collecting all of those people. And if it's a 3 hours interview or seminar or a conference, sometimes I cut it down to like 30 minutes, go to the essence of it. Then I'm sending these to music producers, and they are turning it into something about musical thinking, like a kind of a thought processing through music and soundscape. And then we start to release this as podcasts. All right. So we have 50 episodes of podcasts, which for me is actually the research for the new work. And now they are paying for it. So we also get money to do the research. Then the real creation itself is something entirely different. So from the people you already auditioned and from all the documentary materials that you've gathered from the podcast, then you take all of that to Lagos for 3 months. We lock ourselves down there and we work. And for me, it is to say that there is a way at which the creative process itself can be stretched or organized in a way that it could actually produce different offerings. And we don't wait entirely until everything is done, then we perform this thing on stage. So I no longer believe in the stage as the only space of interaction. So when you say different avenues, yes, I totally get you, because for me, now, I mean, this is the first time I'm going to do a podcast. I've never done a podcast before. I've done a film. I've done dance shows. I've done events. I've done different styles. Now we're getting into sound now, the next one.
Yeah. Great. Well, we're getting close to our time, Q. And do you have any final thoughts that you want to, share with our listeners and viewers? And more specifically, I'm thinking, there's a whole new generation of artists, coming through. Is there anything you feel would be helpful.
Yes. I because of the generation you talk about, I would like to say a few things about the research that I'm doing at the moment at the University of Florida, because for me, this is something that I really hope will at some point bring together a larger community of dancers on a global scale to adopt this project. Because what we're trying to do is create a technology that is using AI, deep learning, and blockchain technology as a way to create a sense of ownership to dancers about their own work. Right now, the digital space is so like a wild west. Nobody knows. We are at the very beginning of understanding that dance can also be currency in itself. That is to say, we are not dancing to create a product or to offer services, but to actually see dance itself as currency. But how do you do that when we live in a space whereby you put your video on Instagram, it no longer belongs to you? And many people don't know that. They don't know that when you put your stuff on Instagram, when you put your stuff on TikTok, when you put it on Facebook or YouTube, all those places, you might think you own the video, but the data doesn't belong to you. So what they do with the data, you don't know. They use it to sell you things, and they sell your data to people who are trying to sell you things. So this is what they do with your data. So we're saying that, okay, in a space where there are games like Fortnite that are now taking people's dance move and selling them on the game for $5, and they're making billions of dollars with it, or the amount of dancing that is yet to be in the NFT spaces. People are going to start taking your stuff from YouTube and putting it into NFTs and selling it as their own NFT. How do you prove that it's yours? Because the law that exists right now does not support dance move. The law supports a ballet, a Swan Lake, Romeo and Juliet. This is the kind of composition structure that the law supports. But all these things coming from Black and African people all over the world, you people going viral, all those kind of things. No, the law does not really support you. So the technology we are trying to create is to see dance as data, not as dance law, IP law. No, I'm not interested in copyright law. I'm interested in IP law that is connected to data rights. So we are creating a system whereby dance can be converted into data, and those data can be converted into codes, and those codes can be put in a blockchain, and that code can become an IP that you own. So if you want to go put your thing on Instagram, you can do that, but first put it in this data bank, so that this data bank gives you a receipt, and you can have something to prove that this is yours. And I think, on a global scale, this is something that many dancers are not paying attention to right now, but it's going to be something that is going to be a major conversation in the coming years. Because imagine the first time where music was put into a record. Before then, people were stealing things anywhere. I travel to Brazil, I hear one music there, I go to France and I release it, then it goes viral. And you're like, but that's my music. You cannot prove it. But until record came, people now started, oh, that's mine. Now, because there is a record. Yeah. So that record is what we are creating. And I hope that when it's ready, even people from Brazil, especially with all the people with the Passinho and those kind of stuff happening in Bahia, in Recife, in Rio, in Sao Paulo, I feel like there's a whole lot those young people can generate for themselves as currency, as continue to do what they're doing in their favelas, and making a huge amount of money because one game is using it, because one Beyonce is using it. So for me, I feel like this will allow people to continue to be creative without worrying, how do I put it online without it being stolen from me?
Q, we could keep talking for the whole day.
Please. No letters.
No, we, as I said, we've had great conversations. It's such a pleasure to have you here with me once again. Thank you very much. I want to thank you for being here and for being who you are and doing what you do, and for being an inspiration to me and now to others who will get a chance to know you a little bit more, especially in Bahia, in Salvador, my hometown. I want to thank the festival Viva Dança for the opportunity to have me introduce Qudus to our community. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure, Q.
Thank you very much,
And
Augusto,
I'll
and
see
thank
you
you
next
very
time.
much to all the people behind this. I think you are the reason why the world is still standing, and let's keep doing what we do so that it doesn't break apart. Thank you very much.